one of my biggest tips for stunts, martial arts, anything you're working on, film yourself. Film it. It's awkward. Go back and watch it and be like, why do I stand like that? Why are my hands like that? Oh, I dropped my hands when I did that specific kick or that specific move. I need to make sure I keep them up. Film yourself. Check on what you're doing. Keep it. Then next year, next month, next week, film it again and compare and see the growth that you've made. It can be very encouraging when you're starting to wonder, like, man, what's the point of this? You can see the progress that you've made and see how you've improved.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome. It's another episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. Today, I'm joined by Aubrey Koontz. Aubrey, thank you for being here. We're gonna chat. This is gonna be fun because you come at this stuff that we're doing here in a different way, and I've had a chance to see you live, doing it live, and I'm excited. Yeah. But for the audience, thank you for being here. A couple things I want you to keep in mind. One, if you're brand new, don't hit the desk while you're recording. But beyond that, I want you to go to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com and sign up for the newsletter. Why? Because we've rolled out a new newsletter, and what's it going to do? We're going to email you on the days episodes are released. We're going to give you behind the scenes material. We're going to give you other great stuff. And how do you do it? Whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. Hit the little subscribe button. Now, this episode, like many of them, is sponsored by Kataro. Shout out and thank you to Kataro, Kataaro.com. They're doing something pretty cool right now for March and April autism awareness. They've got this great special belt. And that belt, if you buy it during this time, they're going to donate half of the profits to, I want to get the organization right, it's over here in my notes, International Society for Autism Research. And just, Kataro does such great stuff for the industry, for us, for all of you. And here's another example of them being awesome. And speaking of awesome, Aubrey's pretty awesome.
Hey.
And you're here, and I'm excited. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, I forgot. WK10 code for Kataro saves you 10%. Okay, now I can. You'd think I've been doing this a while or something. Once in a while. We met at Free Training Day Midwest.
We did.
I had no idea who you are.
Likewise.
If I remember correctly, you had no connection to anyone there.
Nope.
You were one of the... Did you?
I had met one of the presenters before, but I don't even know if that's how I found out about it. Yeah.
Did you meet Jeff? Okay, so you knew Jeff. Jeff's been on the show, Jeff Goodrum.
Awesome.
And you did something that very few people do, and I'm bringing this up because I think this says a lot about you and your personality. You attended a martial arts event where you had virtually no direct connection or expectation or understanding. You just went, this sounds cool, I'm going to show up.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason I know that that's special is because we've done, I think we're at like 15 free training days. Oh, wow. And there are very few people who have done that. Why did you do that? What prompted you to just, here's a martial arts event, I'm going to show up?
I mean, I thought it sounded really cool. I tried to get other people to come with me, and it just didn't work out. But now that they know about it for next time, I had to report back, of course. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we'll have some more people from my little realm of community joining next time, especially if we end up presenting there. But I don't know. I don't get to train in the same type of way that I did kind of growing up. Mm-hmm. And so knowing like, oh, hey, other martial artists, we're kind of weird. Let's be honest. We're a little goofy.
Yes.
So I was like, a local thing. There's other people going to be there. It's, very minimal commitment. You come try a lot of things, learn from a lot of different people. I just thought it sounded awesome. I was like, what is it going to hurt? It's one day.
Was it awesome?
I thought it was awesome. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. So you touched on the fact that you had other people that you tried to get to come in. And this is I think this is part of your personality. And this is why we're starting here. I think it says something about you, and that's where I want to go first. you tried to get other people to go. So you had made this commitment. You were going to go. They weren't walking into an environment where they would know no one because they would know you, but
Yeah.
they were still reluctant to come in. What was it that they told you about their hesitation, their unwillingness?
That's the thing. They don't tell you anything. You
Oh,
present
okay.
you're like, "Hey guys, I'm going to this. I'm going to this." And you get left on red, or maybe
Mm,
you get a liked message, or, "Oh, that sounds cool. I might be there." And just don't.
yeah.
Which part of my group, we would have been skipping our self defense class to go to
Ah,
that, which we might
uh,
end up that might happen this year. But
mm-hmm,
we have training on Saturday mornings, and
mm-hmm,
so this starting, it kind of overlapped with our class.
mm,
So I was like, "Hey, I'd like to do this. I won't be at class this Saturday. If you wanted to move our class there, that'd be cool. Have a little showing." And I think it's a pretty small class, and other people were kind of either happy to have the day off or had other commitments that it just
mm.
didn't quite work out.
Okay.
The stunt team, they didn't have any excuse. They got to join this year. It'll be fun.
So let's talk about that because over the years we've had a number of folks come in, names that the audience knows that you would know that come out of, they made the transition from martial arts to acting or martial arts to stunts, sometimes both.
Hmm.
And I'm always fascinated with the translation and the transition from traditional martial arts to stunt work.
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to set this up and then I'll turn it back to you, but what what I find most fascinating, there's something and I heard him say this in person because I was very fortunate to be in the room. And I know he said it a number of times when Michael Jai White talked about doing his first movie and how terrible it looked because he moved too fast.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that as a traditional martial artist, how many of us were ever taught, oh, hold on, when you're trying to do this for real or make it look like you're doing it for real, you might be going too fast. Blew my mind.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's something that I even, we did kind of like a little, not even seminar, the
Mm,
advanced belt training that Victor and Karen do at Wolf. They had us kind of lead the demonstration actually last week, the prior Saturday, and
mm,
we kind of came at it from the stunt perspective for the purpose of martial arts demonstrations. So like live demonstrations,
mm,
it's still stunts, it's stage combat. It's
yep,
just not on camera, and having to explain you have to learn to do things the wrong way is
mm,
it's a tough thing for martial artists. It's I personally think it's very helpful to have the martial arts background for stunts because it's easier to make things look real when you know how to do them for real than
mm-hmm,
taking somebody who doesn't have that experience and being like, "Hey, throw a punch in a Muay Thai style, throw a kick in a Taekwondo style." If you don't have
mm,
any kind of martial arts reference,
yep.
there's pros and cons.
So what are, other than adjusting speed, what are some of the other changes that a traditional martial artist might be surprised about if they're on screen?
Oh, I'm still learning that myself. Technique for sure. You have to learn to do things bigger. Do things
Mm,
bigger in a way that's
exaggerated, right?
yes,
Yeah.
but it can't look too exaggerated. So it's a fine line of like looking realistic, but being safe and being able to be seen. So I'd
Mm,
say like one of the biggest things, especially from a martial artist who's very, trained in the power and, you drive through your opponent. You don't punch your opponent, you're punching through
mm,
them, right? We can't do that with a scene partner or an actor or
yeah.
whoever's in front of you. You're a partner, so you got to learn to pull your punches basically, or stacking different ways depending on the camera.
Hmm.
And
What do you mean by stacking? What's that term?
so basically it's layering the bodies and or the hits in a way that on camera sells the hit.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if we're
So angles, knowing where the camera is.
yeah, if
Okay.
we're squared off here and I punch you here, like you can very clearly see this gap, but maybe we're stacked here and I punch you like this.
Mm,
And as long as the partner's reaction is good, you can sell hits in a very different way. If you had to sell it this profile, you can stack behind, stack in front. There's a lot of different angles and targeting things that come into when you're factoring hand-to-hand fighting for stunts.
if we go way back, one of the proudest moments I have doing this show is for you're familiar with the show Into the Badlands.
Brief, mildly familiar.
You should go check it out. So it was on AMC. I think they did 4 seasons. For season 2, they reached out and I got to interview the two Daniel Wu and Emily Beecham, who were Daniel definitely, Emily I would say yes, the two leads.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we talked about, one of the things that made that show really special is that my understanding on most films is that the stunt choreography group, right?
Mm-hmm.
The director, all those folks, they are a small percentage.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas on Into the Badlands, it was like 50-50.
Oh, that's awesome.
And if I remember correctly, Daniel talked more about this. So anybody out there, if you're interested, go back to those episodes. Those were kind of fun. And I've never, I haven't been in a movie. I haven't been part of a stunt team. I competed in tournaments, but that's not the same thing, and I'm very aware of that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it gives me an idea of what that I don't know, right? I can tell that I don't know what's going on here. And you just brought up a number of things where you go, oh man, like the angles. And so when you're doing that, how much of that stacking, you said, how much of that is at your discretion versus would director be the right word?
Yeah. So typically there's a hierarchy, right?
Hmm.
Stunt people, we're down here. Or there's the totem pole. You got the director.
Hmm.
Then ultimately the lead actor, but also the stunt coordinator, right?
Mm,
So it's kind of there sometimes is a bit of a competition of desire and wants of the lead actor being like, "Oh, I don't think my character would do it this way," and the stunt coordinator's like, "Okay, but that's what's in the script. That's what's going to be safe." So
hmm.
sometimes there's a little bit of compromise from both ends,
Mm,
and then stunt people, we do what we're told, right? So it's ultimately the coordinator who's more so determining those angles, and saying, hey, the camera is going to be here. You need to be able to sell this in this way. So it's listening. We need to understand the angles. And obviously, a lot of stunt people become coordinators, right?
mm,
Football players become coaches.
sure, that
You,
makes sense.
martial artists become senseis, right? So it's we need to understand that, and it's helpful to know where those requests and where that feedback is coming from, because we can say, oh, obviously the camera's right there. I shouldn't be punching this way. Hey, is it okay if I do a cross instead of an at? Like
Mm,
the attack is still the same. If I stack it here, is that going to be okay for your reaction versus stacking it here? So it's a
okay.
little nuanced, and it's important for us to know those things more, I would say, in training.
Hmm.
Because we're doing that kind of stuff. We're acting as coordinators for each other quite a bit, and like choreographing
Oh, all
test
right.
fights in
Yeah, that
training and
makes sense.
such. So important to understand, I'd say, when it actually comes to an actual film set, we're doing what we're told. So
All right. We're going to come back to this whole stunt piece, but you've brought up a couple times that you had training prior. And so let's go back. Let's talk about that, and that'll give us some context, and we can start to thread the two together. So when did you start training, and why? I guess why is a more important question than when.
well, so my very first time I remember anything martial arts was at Walmart, seeing the Tommy Nitro's Karate Adventure DVD and inflatable punching bag that you could get. It is not great. All love to Tommy Nitro, but I remembered when I got that and I was like, man, this is awesome. I want to do karate. We didn't
How
know.
old were you? Roughly how old
Oh,
were you?
I'd say 7,
Okay.
maybe 7, 6 to 9, probably. I would
Sure.
say.
Sure.
Um, and I remember thinking it was so cool. It was awesome, but we didn't know. My parents had no martial arts like connections or experience
Mm.
growing up, so it was kind of like, I don't know, maybe when you're older, it just never really came up again,
Hmm.
other than me just being like, I want to do that. That'd be fun. Um, and so, really, when I was, I think 13, I always get mixed up if it's 12 or 13, but some of my friends I played basketball with, they just kind of like mentioned, like, oh, yeah, we have karate on Tuesday. And I was like, you do karate? Where? And turns out there was like a whole group of my friends that did martial arts together.
And they didn't tell you?
No, I mean they
They were,
were. I mean they were probably yellow belts or less. Like they hadn't been doing
yeah.
it super long. But I was like, well, good grief, can I do it too? And so, sure enough, the rest is history on that.
So you go home, you tell your parents, hey, karate, I want to do this. And they say yes, and you go. And, I find people starting at adolescence to be really interesting because it's the opposite, right? We think about when people generally start. They usually start really young. They
Mhm.
rarely start in those teen years. And then there's a bit of an increase as people go through their 20s, 30s, 40s.
Right.
What do you remember about those early classes and your interest level and all that
Oh, I loved it. I
from
personally,
day one?
yes,
Okay.
yes. Personally, I'm glad I started when I did
Hmm.
because I think at that age you're old enough to learn good form.
Hmm.
And for me, I haven't grown since I was like 10. So I was in my body and like
Yeah.
obviously things shift and whatever, but that was my body.
Okay.
I didn't have to change as I grew and got
Hmm.
taller or got longer or whatever. I didn't have to adapt. It was like, boom, this is me. This is how my body moves. Let's let's train from that. And I think sometimes when people start at such a young age, they learn poor form that gets excused because it's like, oh, they're 8,
Hmm.
oh, they're just 11, But I think when you're 13, when you're in your teens and in the, adult class, it's a little more stringent, I would say, in making
Hmm.
sure that form is correct rather than just passing it on because they're kids. And so then you have red belts who don't throw a correct side kick because, well, that's how they've always done it because they were children.
Hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So 13 you're doing, and what were you training?
that's a great question. We called it karate. It's a big mix. It was pretty much everything my instructor had trained in
Hmm.
and what he deemed to be the most like practical.
Hmm.
So it's not flashy. It's not pretty
Sounds like what I
flippy.
teach.
Yeah,
What
it's
do you
not
teach? Karate. What
taekwondo.
kind?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
we did not do flashy taekwondo kicks. We didn't really do breaking
Hmm.
boards. We did do some kata. It the ones that I believe are in the mix. It was Ryuku Kempo, American Freestyle, Bushikan Jiu Jitsu, and Okinawan karate. It's just like
It's a mix.
karate.
That is
So
a mix. Yeah.
yeah.
But you enjoyed it.
Oh yes. Oh
Okay.
yes. I love it.
And how long were you, because if I've caught on correctly, you're no longer training in that school.
I'm not. That was
Okay.
in my hometown.
Hmm.
Took me about 6.5 years to get my black belt.
Hmm.
Um, then by that point, I was going to college. So I actually came back on my first Labor Day weekend to test for the black belt. I was like, guys, we got to get moving on this. I'm ready. Um, so pretty much at that point, I had stopped training there other than when I, came back for a winter break or a summer break and they were
Hmm.
still going. Um, just being at school, couldn't
Mhm.
very well come home for Tuesday and Thursday
Yeah, it's
trainings.
tough.
I did do a kind of self-defense martial
You
arts.
clearly loved it.
Yeah, it was fine. A lot
It
of
was
kids.
it was fine.
Well, so it was through the college. So I
Hmm.
thought, great, I'm going to train with other college kids.
Hmm.
No, children. So not quite sure how that worked out, but it was kind of like one of your PE courses with a
And I
bunch of.
suspect you wanted to train.
I did want to. I
And
thought it
some
would be
training better than no training is kind of
fun.
my philosophy.
Yeah, so it was just a semester course. It was just
Mhm.
something to try. Did not sign back up for it again the next semester. Then a pretty study heavy major
Mhm.
at K State, so did not end up having the most free time, and I
Mhm.
filled it with other extracurricular activities and such. So, kind of during college, it fairly well stagnated, other than me going to the fitness center and,
Mhm.
you know, using the punching bag, practicing some kata things just in one of the open rooms. But yeah, not much training, I'd say, for a good four-ish years,
Mm.
4.5 years.
Okay. So you come out of college and then what?
So in college, I found out about the
Oh,
stunt company.
okay.
And so it was just a friend I'd met in an accounting class. We found out we were both martial artists. He did taekwondo, and I was like, taekwondo. I did karate. You got to get that little beef going between you. And he just kind of said, like, yeah, I'm on a stunt team in Kansas City. I was like, wait, that exists? Like, that exists here in
Mm.
Kansas? Like, I don't have to go to Hollywood to do that because I sure don't want to do that. So I came up here and visited Ronan and looked for jobs up here closer to graduation. Got a job in my field with the intention of training with Ronan more so.
Mhm.
I wasn't just set
So
on,
Ronin is the name of the stunt team.
yes, Ronan
Okay.
Stunt Company.
Okay. Um, w- I
So
feel like you skipped over something kind of important. Yeah. Okay. So it's on your shirt. Yep. Um, what was it about stunts that was so inviting to you that you were willing to direct your life in that direction?
So I wish I had an actual like origin story for that. Some of my teammates really do. They're like, I watched this one Bruce Lee movie and it just boom, I knew that's what I had to do. I don't know. I remember thinking like in high school and college, I'm like, man, being a stunt double, that sounds really cool. I don't know how in the world you do that. And so I think one night in college, I just like Googled it, like how
Mm.
to become a stunt woman. And there's all this stuff about, joining guilds and joining the union and moving to Hollywood or LA or Atlanta. And I was like, never mind. Not for me. Won't be doing that. So really made no effort toward it. I just thought, like, man, that'd be really cool. That'd be a cool dream job.
Okay.
And then just kind of,
And then it sort of falls in your lap.
yeah,
Okay. Mm.
pretty
Ooh,
pretty awesome how God works sometimes. It
that's
was
right.
not at all part of the plan. It literally was just conversation about martial arts, and somebody just mentions, "Yeah, I'm on a stunt team," and I was like,
What is it? You know, just about everybody watching or listening knows what it's like to start training martial arts. They know how it feels to step in that first class. They
"Right,
they understand the anxiety. They understand, even if they're training at a s- a second school, a third school, there's still some nerves that happen there. Is it the same thing when you go to a stunt team practice class? I don't even know what we would call it.
I would say so." I think my first couple visits, so I think I got to have basically 2 or 3 visits before
Hmm.
I could join like some of the classes and such. It was awkward for sure. It's a pretty small, or at the time, it was a smaller group.
Mm.
And a lot of people who had like grown up together. So then I come in and I do have like a connection to this guy from school, but not like a great one. It's kind of like, oh hey, I
I
met
know
him
who
in
that person
class.
is.
He
I know
said
their
I could.
name. Yeah.
He said I could come. Like, so it was definitely a little bit like, hey guys, how's it going? And it was during COVID. They're
Mm.
training in masks. It was just kind of like it was different, and
Hmm.
I'd hope new people coming to Ronin now don't feel that same level of kind of trepidation, kind of awkwardness, a little
Mm.
clickiness. But I was excited to be there. They threw me right in and let me kind of do a little bit of fight choreography with them. I think my first day I came, they were doing falls off the fall tower, so that was kind of like, ooh, this is different, crazy. But I'm a fairly competitive person in the sense of I have to step up because they're here, so I need to also be there or better than some of them. And so I think seeing that the team was all at very different levels, knowing that I was not the bottom, knowing that I was at least mid tier was like, okay.
Was that because of your martial arts experience?
I would say so.
Okay.
I mean, we all know martial arts very much depends on body awareness. Like,
Sure.
to be a good martial artist, you should probably know how your body works, how it moves, how long you are. I think that helped me for sure, and definitely
Okay.
gave me some more confidence going into it, especially hand to hand kind of stuff. It's like, okay, I know how to do a reverse punch. I know how to do a jab. I know how to do a roundhouse. Like, those kind of things, they don't have to teach you what those moves are. And then I'd say when you're getting into the falls, the rolls, the layouts, just the general body awareness from martial arts of break falls and knowing how your body moves, how it rolls, how much space you need for
Mm.
the person in front of you. I think that certainly helped me.
Okay. I can imagine that there was some comparison, right? You're taking two things, something you had done for a while and really enjoyed, something that you were new to, but also I suspect enjoyed right away.
Mhm.
Did you find yourself comparing?
Between martial arts and stunts.
Yeah.
So yes, because it is tough sometimes when we get people who are martial artists coming into Ronin just starting. Sometimes some of the boys are like, okay, take all that information you know about martial arts, put it here in this box. It's very nice. We're gonna set it over here
Mm.
for later. It is good to have. We're glad you have it, but right now we're teaching you stunts,
Mm.
um, because of
Put
those.
on put on your white belt is
Yeah,
what I'm hearing. Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, yes, because of just learning the wrong techniques, basically, to be able to keep you and your partner safe
Hmm.
in the demonstrations. One thing that's very weird, we talk about a holy fist. Martial arts, we'd never want to punch something with a holy fist. But
No.
in stunts, it's more important to keep your partner safe than to keep your hand safe. So
Okay.
if you accidentally hit them,
Got it. That
you've
makes
got
sense.
that give to help protect your partner a little bit. Obviously, we don't want to hit each other, but adrenaline happens.
Right.
People forget to duck,
Yeah.
forget to block. So,
When you were starting off with stunts,
mhm.
what skills were you finding to be the most difficult?
Ooh, the most difficult. For me, I am not an adrenaline junkie.
Hmm.
I like it, but sometimes doing falls in different ways, some of the you see some of the boys, they'll just be like, okay, just send themselves off the tower, flipping, hitting stuff. That's very tough for me. The mental block of like, this doesn't feel safe. Granted,
Hmm.
most of stunts is unsafe in some capacity. But there are ways that I feel like, this is within my control, this is within the realm of safety, when it kind of starts getting out of that to a more uncomfortable movement or
Mm.
something that I'm just not as good at, the mental block of like,
How do you work
I don't want
through
to do
that?
that. Sometimes I just avoid it, which
Okay.
is not a good thing.
'Cause I think the closest comparison for most martial artists would be sparring, right? And
Yeah,
stepping up some of that intensity or some of the more free-form self-defense style scenarios where you have multiple attackers, right?
sure,
Some of that stuff I've watched people completely melt down at
right,
testing and everything when they're presented with that because it feels like it's so far outside the realm of safety that they can't wrap their head around it.
right. I think in some ways, I'd say particularly with kind of the sparring scenario, or like if we're doing a say a multiple person fight scene, I think that is very important to trust
Mm.
your teammates,
Hmm.
trust your sparring partner, your scene partner. Uh, I think it's important to build that trust between the people you're training with, to know that like, hey, if I break down, if I can't rise to the occasion, they will stop,
Hmm.
right? They can stop. They can help fill in the gaps and protect me when I'm not able.
Hmm.
So I think for me, it's the stuff that is only dependent on me or non movable objects
Mm.
that I think is hard because there's nothing else. And I know if I can't do it, I might get hurt. I think
Mm.
those are the things that are more difficult for me. And being competitive, being driven to excellence and trying to be the best when I can't do stuff, it's frustrating and it's difficult. So I will say that I have had to significantly improve in that area because it's like, listen, not everybody can do everything. You need to do the things you can and focus on improving those that are more of a struggle.
What's a skill that maybe you weren't comfortable doing when you started stunt work that isn't as big of a deal now?
For me, something that I'm still improving but have very much improved, I would say it's our Rex. So you're hitting the ground pretty hard, and
Mm.
there's not really a way to avoid pain. And I think like there are ways you can lessen the pain, right?
Hmm.
And you're still safe, but pretty much no matter what, it's gonna hurt. So I think those are the things that I have struggled with the most because I'm like, I'm doing it and it's hurting my head. I'm doing it, it's kind of jostling me a little bit. Like
Mm.
it's scary, really. It's just kind of, am I hurt? Am I injured? No. It's just kind of like, I'm doing it wrong. It hurts. And they're like, well, you're not
Yeah.
necessarily doing it wrong. Sometimes it
Yeah.
just hurts.
There's a reason stunt people have a shelf life,
Yeah.
right? You don't see a lot of people, I mean, Jackie Chan being the notable exception I know of, you don't see a lot of people do stunt work for 40 years.
Yeah. And if you do, you very much have to adapt. You have to pivot to the things that your body can still handle.
Yeah.
So I think that's true of the martial arts as well. Like,
Yeah.
again, there are people who do the flying tricking kicks and spin with a bow staff and do this flipping butterfly kick, 540 tornadoes, but there are people who can't do that, and that doesn't make them less of a martial artist. It just means their strengths are elsewhere. And I would say, particularly in Ronin, we try to focus on your strengths. We think everybody should be a well-rounded stunt performer. We
Hmm.
all need to know the basics, right? Everybody should be able to do this.
What
But
are some of the basics?
basics, I mean, you have to know hand to hand. You have to
Hmm.
be able to throw a convincing punch or kick. Do you have to be able to kick at the head? Not necessarily. But if you're going to kick at the head, you better be controlled enough to
Mm.
do so. I think we kind of say if you can't hold a kick at a certain level, you should not be kicking at that level
Mm.
in a fight scene because then you're out of control. You're
Hmm.
not you're not in a position to keep your partner safe if you're just throwing it to throw it. It doesn't matter if you can get your foot up there if it's not in a controlled way that is going to keep your partner's head safe.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
But basics, I'd say hand to hand, at a pretty base level for everybody. Tactical work, you should know how to hold pistols and rifles and look somewhat convincing walking with them. Uh, Basic layouts and roles, which a layout's kind of, sprawling. It's kind of more what we would think of like a break fall. You should be able to hit the ground at least decently aggressively. Wrecks and falls, I would say you're starting to get into more specialized territory. There are kind of base level wrecks and falls that we all should know, but then kind of getting into those, the higher falls, the harder hits, the more intricate, you're falling, but you're bouncing off this thing, and we call it tick-tocking down. There are different levels, I guess, to all these categories, and we should all be decent or all be good at the levels, but everybody kind of excels in different areas.
Sounds like a similar philosophy to training in a traditional martial arts school.
Of course. Yeah.
Some people are going to prefer forms or sparring or grappling, but we want everybody to have a base level on all of these things for various ranks.
Right. You should all be able to protect yourself as best you can, right?
Okay. I've asked this question before, but I'm going to ask it of you because different people have given me different answers. How has your time training in stunts changed your relationship to martial arts, and how has your martial arts background impacted your relationship to stunt work?
That's a good question. I am still able to train a bit on Saturdays, kind of like what I mentioned. It's a bit of a different setup than kind of the school that I went to before. It's kind of a small get together. The man doesn't charge, but it's a similar like mixed style. It's kind of all his things. He's got some Aikido, he's got some Taekwondo, he's got some other forms of karate and different things. And so his style, he calls it practical combat systems. So in a similar vein, it's still the stuff that's more practical. We're more focused on self-defense and making sure we get home safely at the end of the day, right? So then comes in stunts, where in some ways you do need to be a little more flashy depending on the style that we're going for the fight. You can have a big wide brawler thug fight where you're untrained, or you can have a tight like really boxer fight, and then kind of everything in between, right? So I think it's been interesting in stunts for me to kind of lean into other styles in different ways, or like learning to try to emulate different styles. But at the end of the day, I definitely default back to my style, right? It's muscle memory. It's what's been ingrained into you. I would say that I do try to focus on kind of reactions and stuff more, even in my martial arts class. It's like if somebody's supposed to be punching me in the face or punching me in the gut, I try to at least give it like, because it's light practice for anticipating directions of attacks, making sure my body is moving, caving, and turning, and making sounds the right way. I've had to get louder for stunts. We all ki, or at least we should. You got to be loud. You got to sell it when you're doing stunts. So there's just so much crossover, but also so many differences. So I think it's just really broadening kind of my understanding of my martial arts, but then taking bits and pieces from other ones to be able to at least portray them convincingly enough on screen. So they're like, hey, we need a cool Muay Thai fight. Like, I haven't trained in Muay Thai. Like, I've trained some elbows and knees and whatever, but I need to be able to adapt my fighting style to that, at least convincingly enough for choreography. Okay. So I feel like there's a lot that it affects of each other, but I don't think they're necessarily hindering each other anymore, when maybe early on it was like, but why would I punch like that? That's you mean I'm supposed to punch wrong? I think that was a little bit of a hurdle that I had to get over, and that I think a lot of martial artists have to get over, is like, but why would I do that? But that doesn't
Right.
make sense. It's like, correct.
It, I
Doesn't make sense.
suspect it's similar to what happens for a lot of us when we train in a new style and things are done
Mhm.
differently. And a lot of people will just throw out what they've done. It's always in there. But
Mhm.
for some people who want to maintain those two distinct skill sets, right? Here's my karate, here's my taekwondo, or whatever they may be. That flip back and forth can be really challenging, and I imagine that that's what you're facing as well.
Right. I mean, I would kind of say, in a way, it's like learning a separate martial art,
Yeah.
especially in kind of the hand to hand thing, that in the different styles and ways that we learn. It's they're very similar, but they're not the same. So I think, in a way, I would prefer to have the martial arts experience than not, because we
Hmm.
definitely have people that come to stunts that don't have it, and it's not bad. It's just different. So
Hmm.
I think having that martial arts base is great, but you do have to kind of sometimes box it up and put it away to learn this new way of doing things.
Yeah. Okay. So what's next when you think about all this, right? And I don't mean that you're peaked or anything. You're obviously quite young, and this is all still fairly new for you. But I know you've had some success, and sounds like you're at least as passionate about it as you were.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you're not thinking about what's next with this.
Yes. I think it would be so cool to do stunts full time.
Mm,
I don't know that I would foresee that happening, nor would I necessarily want to. Um, I would and I wouldn't, right? I think it would be tough. You would have to sacrifice lots of things. Basically, throw the degree out the window and the career job,
hmm.
like, mm,
Yeah.
and kind of hope to make it big, right? And I do kind of feel like for stunts, the way to do that, you'd have to move. You'd have to
Yeah.
move to those bigger film markets.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't want to do that. I I like being here in the Midwest for now. I like having the relationships that I have here. I love training with Ronan while also having the stability of a career job.
Mm.
um,
I
so
would imagine that being a full-time stunt performer becomes very nerve-wracking because if you're injured,
right,
now you're also unemployed.
hmm,
That sounds terrifying to me.
it does. um, I I like having a reliable job.
Yeah.
Do I enjoy my job as much as I enjoy stunts? Absolutely not. But I enjoy it enough, and I'm very thankful for the flexibility that they do
Mm.
offer me, because film is so unpredictable. Like, I could get a coordinator to text me and be like, "Hey, are you available tomorrow?" I'm like, uh, maybe. Let's see.
Yeah.
So my job
What's
has
your day
been.
job?
I am an interior designer for commercial businesses. So yeah, lots of furniture, lots of
Not
specs,
not
lots of pricing.
not anything to do with martial arts or stunt work.
Not even remotely.
Not
No,
can't even I don't even know how we get there.
no. Everybody always likes to hear about it. They're like, "What? You do that?" I'm like, yeah. Um. So I don't know, and I would like to be able to keep doing stunts as long as I can.
Hmm.
Obviously, like you said, there's a shelf life. I don't know how much more the body takes. I already wake up with like, my back. And, my coworkers are like, oh, you're young. You don't know. I'm like, well, martial
So
arts.
let's talk about recovery then, because it's a subject that martial artists are starting to talk about
Mhm.
because for the longest time, uh, most of what I heard out of the martial arts community around recovery and health was just shut up and train harder.
Yeah.
And
Toughen
that
up.
was about it, right? And then it was, oh, well, ice and ibuprofen, which, heads up, everybody, neither of those improves your recovery. Both of them slow your recovery. You don't have
Right.
to believe me. You can go do your research. Um, but I can't imagine that you and the folks you're hanging out with in the stunt world are taking that approach.
Well, you might be surprised.
Really?
I I
Okay.
try not to personally. I do know there's a lot of, energy drinks and ibuprofen being consumed. I've tried to avoid that if I can.
Yeah.
Uh, I definitely sleep with a heating pad every night
Hmm.
on my back.
Okay.
Um, I think it's just important. It's same with martial arts. You gotta stretch, you gotta warm up. Try to stretch before and after.
Mm-hmm.
If you get hurt or jostled or pulled something or strained a little bit, stop. Like,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're on a set, they sometimes say we got to be invincible. Like, the
Mm.
stuntman's untouchable, right?
Oh, that's
But
gotta be tough.
if we're training, like, listen to the body, right? You need to stop. Don't injure it more. I got dropped doing a wire stunt just in training and messed up my shoulder for like a
Mm.
year and a half. So it's all good now, but it might come back to bite me when I'm older. Um, so I think it's just important to figure out and make sure you know how to protect your body
Mm.
if you get dropped. Don't have your arm extended and get it crushed, right? Same with like break falls and taking rolls and whatnot. You learn how to shape your body in a way that can help protect those joints and protect the bones. When we do a layout, we're not just eating it or taking it on the big muscle groups, right? And then
Mm.
rolling. That's not to say you're not still going to get bruised. You're not still going to feel it in the morning, but it's going to give you much better longevity knowing how to take the hits, knowing how to fall, knowing how to react. If you get punched in the face, you don't just whip your head. You whip your shoulders and turn with
Mm.
the hips and the waist, and then you throw the head, right? If you're falling back in just a back break fall, think of that. You keep your head tucked, keep
Mm.
it tucked, and once your body stops, then throw your head, right? There's there's just ways I would say to try to prevent the pain, prevent the injuries, but when they do come, everybody's different. I use a roller. I have a massage gun. I have a heating pad. I
Okay.
have
So you're at
some.
least you're at least thinking about it. You're probably doing more than most martial artists
Yeah,
with that. And water, right? Sure.
water, of course. Oh, I drink water all the time. So,
Water's going to flush all that stuff out if it's available to be flushed.
mm-hmm.
It's, I find it funny that as a community that at least a significant portion holds up our ability to protect ourselves as the litmus test for skill.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are a lot of people who are chronically injured in a way that limits their ability to keep themselves safe, and they do nothing about it. And I find that to be so counterintuitive, so silly.
Right.
Don't be silly.
Don't be silly.
Don't be silly.
Just don't.
All right.
Yeah.
Stunts, traditional interior design. What else should we know about you? What other weird off the wall thing are you going to pull out of a corner of your interests that doesn't relate to anything else? And to the audience, that sounds like I'm leading her on to something. I don't. I'm just guessing.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like to me it all goes together, right? It's my life,
Because it's
like,
you,
but
right? Right.
but I guess the things that are kind of like, what, really? I mean, I am pretty involved in my church and
Okay.
doing stuff with the kids, for better or worse. I do I do try to help them out there.
I think that's
Um,
for better. I think anytime anybody's helping kids, that's a good thing.
yeah, it's a matter of the attitude with the kids when they're not listening and whatnot. So,
Well, yeah, I mean,
all right,
sometimes they're a pain in the butt.
come on. Yeah, so I do a little bit of teaching with the kids. I love event planning, and
Okay.
I like to dress up. And
Right.
Victor and Karen's they had their double dagger class
Yeah.
actually that just finished up this weekend. I had a
So,
different
so
outfit for every
to the
class.
audience, Victor Garino, who's been on the show many times, his wife Karen, who her birthday was yesterday.
Yeah.
So happy birthday, Karen.
Woo-hoo.
And they've been doing some fun classes, and yeah, I saw some shots of the most recent one. I'll let you talk about it, but I heard you were the one that committed to dressing up the most.
Oh, of course. Yeah. If there's an opportunity for me to dress up for something that's, somewhat acceptable or mildly expected, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
We can't really just go to work every day in a costume. That'd be weird. But if there's some kind of costume contest at work, or, if they're like, oh, bring costumes for stunts tonight, we're going to film some fight scenes in a character. I'm like,
Hmm.
all right,
So
done.
here's the common thread, right? So we've got a common thread now, and I'm wondering if the audience is picking up on it. Church doesn't fall into it, but it's being someone else,
Yeah,
right? So
it's all
when you
right.
were we're not going to poke at this too much because, this isn't even though we've had plenty of people that and their episodes turn into therapy. And I think we're up to like half a dozen people who've cried.
Oh, there you
That's not what I set out for.
go.
But who did you want to be when you were a kid?
See, I think that's it. Like I didn't know. Like
Really? Okay.
some kids like, oh, when I grow up, I'm gonna be this. I never really
Was
had
there a
that.
celebrity or an actor or an athlete that you really looked up to?
No, I
Okay.
mean, I wish I
Interesting.
had like cool answers for these things. I just
Yeah.
didn't. I am not. I I would say I'm not an imaginative or creative person. Like
Mm,
I am artistic. I like to do artistic things, but it doesn't come from me, if that makes sense.
okay.
I feel like I'm usually taking things and trying to make them better, or seeing
Okay.
work someone else has done and more or less plagiarizing it, trying
It's
to
a
do it.
left brain approach to right brain things.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I think
All right.
so.
I actually can relate to that very much.
Yeah. So, I
Hmm.
mean, I think that's part of the thing that is confusing about, being somebody else, because you would think I would enjoy kind of like role play games or like LARP. I went to LARP with some friends one time. I didn't like it. It was weird. I wasn't
Your
good at
your
it.
your face absolutely confirms that.
Yeah. It was worth a try. It was a fun enough
For the
experience.
audience, LARP is a live action role playing, and imagine it like Dungeons and Dragons, but instead of on paper and with dice, you're acting it out as a character, as an
Yeah.
actor.
Live action D&D.
Yeah.
I was not good at it. I just am not good at improv, I guess is probably what it is. if if you gave me a script and you were like, Aubrey Koontz, you are this character, you need to say these words, great. But if you're like, oh, pick your character, become them,
Hmm.
no. So I don't know what that says about me. I'm not good
So
at D&D.
it
I'm not good at LARP. Not good at
it
improv.
it is ironic that you bring up improv because I've said on the show I think it is the non-martial arts thing that most martial artists would benefit from the most.
Really?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
why do you say
A couple years ago, I said I want to do something I haven't done, and took an improv class. It was like 6 weeks,
that? Mm,
and it changed the way my brain worked,
interesting.
and not just in terms of thought process and verbal, but physical as well. I would encourage you to do it, even if you're not going to become an improv comic, even if you're not going to be a script actor, right? Even if you're going to remain in the stunt world, I think there's a lot of value there because it forces us to break down those barriers
Mhm.
What is in almost every martial arts school, what is the general rule of self-defense? The only wrong move is
Nothing.
doing
No.
nothing, right? And that's what improv fights, is that instinct to just do nothing and
Right.
freeze.
Right.
That it teaches you to accept that your first instinct is usually the right one.
But
And so
also
I think
not
there's a
to get
lot of value there.
married to it and be able
Yeah.
to pivot to something else if
Yeah,
need.
it just, you throw a technique in sparring and it doesn't work. You don't just sit on the mat and cry and say, "Oh, it didn't work." You go on to the next one. It's not about one particular movement. It's about the match, or it's about that class, or it's about that learning process. And yeah, I think you should do it. I think everybody out there should do it. I really think you should do it.
I mean, more or less, sometimes stunts is improv. You got
Hmm.
punched in the face and you're over here, oh, I'm just in so much pain, but your partner's fighting somebody else and he's not ready for you yet. So you're just like, oh, are they done? No, okay. So
So
you do
I,
have
I
to
don't
keep acting sometimes.
I can't speak to the stunt world on this, but I know that in the acting world, a lot of what we celebrate the most in terms of lines and monologues and scenes in film and TV has a heavy component of improv. Robin
Mm-hmm.
Williams is one of, the most beloved actors of all time, and there's a documentary coming out. And I know this has nothing to do with sports, but there's a documentary coming out about Mrs. Doubtfire, which
Mm-hmm.
is what, a 90-minute movie? They
Yeah.
have something like 40 to 50 hours of Robin Williams film that they are going through to produce this documentary
Oh my goodness.
for a 90-minute movie because he kept wanting to do different takes on it.
Right. Ah,
That's how
that's
I approach forms.
how
I'm
you
not saying
approach.
I'm the Robin Williams of forms, although depending on how you interpret that statement, it might be accurate. Uh, but I like looking at forms and technique in different ways. How do I completely twist this and look at it differently? It's fascinating to me.
That's valid.
And I bet you do the same thing.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's important to be able to do the same thing differently because
Hmm.
inevitably a director wants it different. A director
Right.
wants it to be able to, oh, well, what if we put the camera over here? It's like, great, none of our stacking works from there. So let's think of how we could move to get to the position we want or how we can just reorient our angles. Or sometimes they're like, could you come up with something else? You have
Right.
10
And
minutes.
sometimes they don't tell you what else,
Oh,
right? Sometimes you have to come up with it, is my understanding.
yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
If it is,
there's some improv, there's some creativity,
oh, for
there's some
sure.
of it.
I'm just not as good at it. I personally do
Yet.
not enjoy coming up with the fight scenes.
Oh, okay. All right. I
I
can see that.
I have to do it sometimes.
Yeah.
We do it in training, we do it in other scenarios. That's not my strong suit as the not imaginative, not creative. Some people they're just whipping it out like, okay, so
Mm,
you do a punch and you're gonna block like this and twist it this way, and it might be perfectly practical. It might not be practical at all, but they came up with it really fast, right? And I'm like, okay, somebody's going to do a hook punch. I'd probably do a wedge block, right? And then a hook and a knee. That's my default for everything. I want a wedge block, hook, knee. That's just my
yeah.
go to.
It's
Um,
effective. Can't
I
argue
mean,
that.
hey, I'm a
It
small
works.
person. I got to get in, take the wins where
That's
I
right.
can. Which I think is practical for both martial arts and self defense, learning what your body does the best, how your body moves. It's not going to be the best thing for me to try to kick a 6'3" guy in the face from standing, right? I got to take the wins where I can.
Right.
If I get in and stay in, I'm probably getting picked up or grappled or taken to the ground. So I
Kick
got
him
to,
in the knee first and then kick
yes,
him in the face.
get in, get my digs, get
That's right.
out. It's
That's right.
important to know your capabilities and your strengths and play to them and try to minimize your weaknesses. It's true in stunts, true in martial arts, probably true in interior design, probably true at church. Like, take advantage of your skills and abilities that you've been given and try to use them to the in the best possible ways you can.
For sure. If people want to find you online, how would they do that? Socials or web or anything like that?
So Instagram is probably the most public thing that I have. It would just be at aubreykuntz.4. You can look at Ronin Stunt Company. We're on all major social media platforms that I'm aware of. I believe we have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, probably. We have our website, roninstuntcompany.com. There we have our personal links for all the team members of our IMDb's, our stunt reels, our stunt listing profiles. That'd probably be the most cohesive place to keep up on what we're doing.
We'll get all that stuff linked up in the show notes. And, Aubrey, I'm going to kick it back to you to close in just a moment. Audience, it's quite a ride, right? Like, here's what I'd like to ask all of you. I'd like you all to spend just a few minutes in acknowledgement of this episode, thinking for just a little bit. What is it you do that could be a little more uh, play to the crowd, play to the audience, right? I'm not saying that you go into your next class and you spend the whole hour trying to sell your forms or your self-defense sets or anything and embarrassing yourself and then coming back and telling your instructor it's my fault. But I think that thought process has some value for sure. So check that out and check out whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. Transcript, links, photos, all the stuff from this episode. Aubrey sent over some stuff. We'll get that all in there. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for the Martial Arts Radio newsletter. Get notified of every new episode right in your inbox. You can click to it right from there, as well as behind the scenes stuff and other bonuses you're not going to find anywhere else. And it's free. It's free. Why would you not do it? It's completely free. You know what else is great? Kataro. Not free, but WK10 saves you 10% on the autism awareness belt or any of the other great custom made stuff that they do over there. Thank you to Kataro for supporting us, KATAARO.com. Aubrey, how do we close today? What do you want to say?
I'd say probably one of my biggest tips for stunts, martial arts, anything you're working on, film yourself. Film it. It's awkward. Go back and watch it and be like, why do I stand like that? Why are my hands like that? Oh, I dropped my hands when I did that specific kick or that specific move. I need to make sure I keep them up. Film yourself. Check on what you're doing. Keep it. And then next year, next month, next week, film it again and compare and see the growth that you've made. And it can be very encouraging when you're starting to wonder, like, man, what's the point of this? You can see the progress that you've made and see how you've improved. So I think filming is a great way to see your progress, see how you're looking if you are catering towards a live demonstration of some sort. Making sure you're seeing how it's going to sell or look to an audience is a very important thing. And if that's not your thing at all, still good for self-reflection on your improvement over time and seeing the things you need to work on. But thank you so much for having me today. I'm always happy to talk about stunts, happy to talk about martial arts.
Thanks for being on.